Hello, I'm Sharon Ross with the Capital City Arts Initiative. Welcome to another CCAI Online Nevada Neighbors Talk. Today we are pleased to present the Career Path panel, who they will discuss the ways that they each balance their art careers with their day jobs. Paul Baker Prindle, who is director and curator at the Kleefeld Contemporary Art Museum in Long Beach, California, will moderate the panel. Also with us are Megan Berner, Jonathan Farber, and Michelle Laxalt. Welcome, everyone.
Hey, everybody. I'm Paul Baker Prindle. I'm delighted to be part of this discussion today. Thank you, Sharon, for the introduction. I'm currently the director of Carolyn Campagna Kleefeld Contemporary Art Museum in Long Beach, California. And we're going to talk a bit today with some really great artists who I've known for quite a while. So let me pass this on to Michelle Laxalt, a great artist, a graduate of University of Nevada, Reno, former student of mine, and just a really fantastic, amazing artist. Thanks for watching today, and let us know if you have questions after you watch the video. Thanks.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Paul, for moderating, and thank you, Crystal, Sharon, and the Capital City Arts Initiative for making this conversation possible. My name is Michelle Laxalt. I am originally from Reno, Nevada. Currently, I'm residing in Atlanta, Georgia, and I am a sculptor working primarily in ceramics and textiles. My work ranges in scale from handheld to life-size, and the majority of my work deals with the vulnerabilities of our corporeal existence and what that means to inhabit a vessel that will ultimately fail. So I draw on the human body, the animal body, and then currently my work is starting to expand and incorporate more imagery from the organic, natural, and plant world.
Thanks, Michelle. Megan, how about you next? I skipped Jonathan. We'll just do this way. Megan, one next. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Megan Berner. I am an artist living in Reno, Nevada. I am actually originally from here and from the high desert area, and that has really influenced my artwork over the years. I am currently, so my practice is mostly photography based. With that, I do a lot of experimental and traditional techniques like cyanotype, digital transfer. I like to use instant film. I use digital cameras. I hardly use film anymore. I like to manipulate imagery and sort of create these experimental pieces. You can see some of my work behind me, that it combines digital transfer and cyanotype and double exposed Polaroids that I scan and blow up. Currently, I also do stuff on textiles, like cyanotype prints and, sewing and creating flags. That's been a large part of my practice. Currently, I'm printing really large prints. They're about 3.5 feet, 4 feet by 13 feet on fabric that are translucent, and they'll hang. They're based on some of my transfer and cyanotype work. Most of it's landscape based, but I don't consider myself a landscape photographer.
Yeah, I want to poke at that. I'm going to ask that a follow-up question there. Thanks, Megan. Jonathan, why don't you introduce yourself next?
Yeah, my name is Jonathan Farber. Originally from LA, but moved up here when I was 12 and tried moving away several times, but this place always dragged me back, and I'm happy to be here in Reno. Currently, prior to my practice now, I was a sculpture major at UNR and then went to Indiana University, Purdue University, for a master's in sculpture, but had to drop out and came back and did something else completely away from the art realm. And we'll talk about that later. But right now, I lost my my studio privileges with all my sculpture stuff. So I've been actually doing a lot of drawing. Mine is based on automatic drawing, pretty much just meditation. As I draw, I just meditate, and helps with my job, helps with my stress levels. So, yeah.
Great. It sounds like your other recent creation is waking up.
Yes. Let me know if that's.
It's great. It's great. It's a nice melody in the background.
Yeah.
So, Sharon was sharing with us as we were getting started that the idea for this really emerged from a question that a lot of young artists have, but also I think a lot of family members have, and I think maybe most importantly, a lot of questions we have that we ask ourselves, which is, what is it like to be an artist? What does it mean to be an artist? What does it mean to be a professional artist? What does professional even mean? How do we do it? So over, the next a little less than an hour, I'm gonna just shoot questions to you all that might help us kind of scratch into that surface of when people see our work in galleries or museums or wherever they might see it on a screen, wherever, the whole sort of background, all the labor, the blood, the sweat, the tears, you don't see that, right? And of course, I think I've been watching the stories and the papers about this illusion of reality that Instagram offers, and the sort of unpleasant consequences that kind of false notion of reality offers. And I think this actually happens a lot with the arts, that people think, we've all had those questions like, oh, can you photograph my wedding for free? Can you do me this? Can you do me that? Without really realizing the sort of day-to-day of being an artist. So I thought we might talk first about how you all entered into developing a practice. So, one of the things I used to share with students a lot is that the key, from my perspective, one of the keys to a long-lived practice is the ability to formulate a question and then chew on it for a long time. And approach it from different ways and sustain you. So I wonder if you guys might talk about sort of how you all developed the questions that orient your practice. And it sounded, Michelle in her introduction was saying that, some things have sort of shifted. And Megan talked about how she doesn't consider herself a landscape artist. And sounds like you used to do film, but have moved more into digital production. And Jonathan sort of had a different kind of occupational interests, and sounds like potentially financial interests that drove him in a different direction. So maybe, I don't know who wants to tackle that first, but if the question's clear, jump in. Not all at once.
Sorry. I'm really driven by material exploration, and for me, a lot of my concepts seem to be attached to my work, either while I'm making the work or even after I make the work and I get to live with it for a little bit. So I don't necessarily start out with like a thesis statement or a question necessarily. It's more of like a material investigation and getting excited about building on previous work and seeing how I can address the concepts that kind of surfaced in that work through current and future work that I'm making. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, for me, it really, really does come down to the materials, and I'm so tactile and tactilely oriented that's the biggest thing for me, is just starting the piece and then seeing where it goes. And then there's always concepts that seem to surface with them. Not that they're reverse engineered or anything like that, but that is how I get to my concepts, is through the act of making.
I love that. I feel like I so relate to that, but I feel like I'm almost the opposite. So I'm very materials oriented. I feel like that drives my practice as well. But I think concept, and I'm not saying I have a thesis statement or a very clear concept necessarily, but there's something there that drives then the making and the the experimenting with materials. It's funny because I would say my art practice, I mean, I've been doing it pretty much for all my life, but I started taking photography in high school and continued to do that in college. And so, yeah, I don't know what it was that drew me to photography. I like drawing too, but there's something different, there to that. But a lot of my initial work had to do with being a twin and exploring identity. And I still think a lot of my work relates to that, though it's not photographing myself or my sister or, humans as much anymore, but tying that to the landscape. And so I think the reason I said I'm not a landscape artist is because my concepts, I feel like while they are driven by place and sort of that link to place, it's more about this sort of ethereal emotional aspect to these things. And so it's trying to convey those feelings through the, manipulation of the images and the materials and that kind of process. So yeah, I feel like all my work is kind of linked that way. And a lot of it came from when I was in graduate school at the University of Iowa. The Midwest was a foreign landscape to me, so flat, which really disoriented me. And so I started making work just about connecting to place very consciously when I was in graduate school. And I think that has continued.
Megan, I can attribute and have your sentiments about being in the flatlands of Iowa. Indiana was very flat, and it was very disorienting for me, and I felt like I was in a bubble. That was hard. My practice, I actually gave myself rules while I was in at UNR and IUPUI. I was kind of all over the place. I didn't have any rules for myself. And then when I switched to my drawings, I gave myself the rule of working either on a 22 by 28 piece of paper or 14 by 17 and filling the whole thing. And that's my rule. So just fill out the paper, and that is my practice. And that's when I know when I'm done with that piece of artwork.
Thanks. All of you. This is, I think, a good spectrum of kind of how artists work. I'm curious. I have two follow-ups to this. So one, I want to push a little bit on all of you because I think there's a little bit of the mystic coming in here. Like, it just unfolds. But how do you formulate those questions that are? How do you recognize the questions that lead to the next thing? How do you know what the next thing is? And then tied to that, I think if you could talk a little bit about maybe the distractions or the realities that get in the way of recognizing what your work is telling you. I suspect we can all agree that our work talks back to us, maybe. So yeah, I think the question is how sometimes we miss what the work is telling us. So if you three can maybe speak to that a little bit, that'd be helpful, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say in all practical reality, I work a full-time job that is not my art making. And so I think that's my big distraction in terms of not being able to spend as much time with my work as I'd like to, so that I can sort of get the feedback from it and move on to the next thing. So I do feel like, honestly, currently I have a lot of multiple bodies of work in motion that I haven't been able to fully, I don't know if reconcile is the right word, but to be with and to continue and see through to where it leads next. And maybe that's not true. Maybe I have, because I've started a second thing, that has sort of branched from that, but I still feel like I want to go and resolve some of the past work that I've started. I think I am the kind of artist I realized in graduate school. It seemed like there were a lot of artists that I was around at the time in my cohort who were extremely productive and like would go into the studio and work all the time. And I know in graduate school, there's pressure to do that. So I felt more productive than I normally am. That is not how I work. And I've realized that over the years, you know, putting pressure on myself for a while and then saying, you know what, I really do need a lot of time to sort of be with ideas, chew on things, let them, you know, sit, to research things. And then finally, you know, I'll feel ready to try to put that idea, you know, out into the material world. I suspect there are lots of other artists that work that way too, but I feel like I go through periods of, you know, productivity and then really not on the outside making much or, you know, looking like a productive practice.
I can totally relate to that, and my practice really does ebb and flow. And I think that I have someone in my cohort that calls it like inhaling and exhaling. And so there's these periods of exhaling where I feel like I'm super productive and really kind of actively addressing the questions that drive my work. And then there's moments where it's really introspective, and there's, yeah, like Megan said, like sketching or even hiking or taking photographs of the things that inspire you, or even, you know, reading documentaries. Like all of those contribute to the overall practice, even if that doesn't, yeah, like on the outside appear like art making, it is still very much a part of it.
Jonathan, I'm curious, as Megan and now Michelle were kind of commenting on this, because of the job I have, how I pay my mortgage, I make work, but I don't show it much because I work for the state of California and there's conflicts of interest and blah, blah, blah. So I've been really struggling with, like, you know, am I a creative still? And the thing that I do actually outside of work, the thing I do the most is garden, and garden has really become my studio practice in many ways. So I wonder, for you, because I know you have a full-time job that's not in the arts, do you think of your full-time job as part of your practice in a way?
I think my art drives my, I would say, sense of well-being with my job. I work in the critical care unit at a local hospital here in Reno. And my sense of mental well-being has been struggling for the last year and a half with the pandemic and dealing with patients in that realm. I witness a lot of sad things and on a day-to-day basis at my job. And so I try and use my art as a coping mechanism. And it does actually really help me. Pretty much on a daily basis, I try and keep a chain going. Even if I draw for 5 minutes, that's part of my chain. And it feels, I feel a little disconjugate when I'm not drawing. And so again, even 5 minutes will help just calm my mind and help my mental well-being, I guess.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And hey, thank you for the work you're doing. It's so important right now.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting to do this kind of line of work when I first started, and I was definitely not expecting a pandemic to hit in my career. But here I am, and we're all making it through. So.
Yeah, I mean, such an epic year, or really 2 years for everybody. I mean, there's massive social upheavals. Northern Nevada has just been decimated by the watershed of global climate change. I'm curious, I think, one of the kind of first levels beneath the surface is this sort of question of realities. And then I think an even deeper level is like how we as artists deal with kind of even bigger realities, like, you know, how does a pandemic affect your studio practice? How does all of, you know, the aftermath of George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor's murder and literally hundreds of others, even, I think I know all three of your practices enough to know, you know, your primary concerns are not traumas or perhaps even, you know, social concerns, societal concerns, but what's been going on over the last 2 years must have an effect on your ability to make things. Is that fair assumption?
I would say for me, my practice has not exploded, but has definitely increased with the pandemic. You know, prior to, I would be going out with friends, still do that, but it's definitely minimized. So even with a newborn, I have more time, surprisingly. So I get home from work or on my days off, I can have the time to and give myself the time to develop more work. And I feel like somehow, surprisingly, my practice has improved time-wise, and I'm producing more work nowadays.
Cool.
You both agree, Megan, Michelle?
Go ahead, Megan.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, you know, for me, I think it's a little bit of both. At first, I really struggled. And I was doing more things like gardening and baking, which are sort of things that ground me and make me feel still creative, but not being in my studio. It just felt weird on some level to be making work at the time. And I was trying to put out my Good Morning book of all my Good Morning photographs. And, you know, I did have some questions like, you know, is this the right time to be doing this, you know? But now I think it's almost, you know, not to sound cliche, but you're reorganizing your priorities and saying, yeah, okay, I need to make more time for this. And so I feel like I've, over the last couple months at least, had a much more consistent studio practice than before.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. The beginning of the pandemic was really rough, and I think we were all just really disoriented and afraid and uncertain. And yeah, it felt weird even like sharing artwork in the beginning of the pandemic on social media. It felt like incredibly privileged and then sometimes like a little bit tone deaf. And so then I got, you know, a little self-conscious about doing that. But as this thing has gone on, I love seeing what people are up to, and that gives me a little bit of hope in a year that has been incredibly dark. And yeah, so it kind of shifted in my mind of like, yes, this is a privilege, but also, yes, this is like something that gives meaning to life, and we have to enjoy that, and we have to revel in that joy. And then I think also with the reorganization of priorities, it has allowed me to really take a step back and be like, okay, I want to prioritize my practice more, but I also want to prioritize the things that make me feel whole as a human, you know, like spending time with my friends and safely, and with my partner, and, you know, being outside when I can, and just really just being grateful for what we have, because I think this past year showed us that it can all just flip on a dime. And so now I do kind of see an art practice as like a practice of hope, as cheesy as that might sound. But that's how it's shifted for me in my mind.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, that's really helpful. I'm curious, you know, I think, I'm in my 40s. My grandparents were born, they were toddlers when the Spanish flu happened and lived through World War II. And I always just, even as a young person, recognize kind of what an amazing generation they were. And I sort of have always thought that some of the tough things they went through helped turn them into the powerful generation they were. So I wonder, kind of taking it a little down from the heroic level, but I mean, how do you see this experience helping you navigate some of the kind of tough logistical, financial challenges moving forward? Do you feel like, because I think the question that is sort of the spectral presence in this whole conversation is like, can you make a living as an artist? Has your answer to that question shifted because of what we've gone through?
I don't know. I've seen a lot of people kind of really dive more into their art practices during this and, start small businesses, start, small design firms, pottery firms. So that, and you wouldn't expect that, like when everything kind of seems stacked against you, to kind of take that leap. For me, I'm still, kind of stuck at my job, which is okay. And I should have mentioned, I manage a nonprofit gallery. So I'm very much involved with artists, but it has been really inspiring seeing how much more prolific some of the artists I work with, how much more prolific their practices has become. And so, of course, I'm thinking about that in terms of myself, but the timing just has to be right to kind of take that leap.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
No, I think you both were going to say something, so go for it.
Jonathan, go ahead.
You go ahead, Megan.
I was just gonna say that I'm not sure my idea of that has changed, and I think it's, I don't want to say this over and over because I don't think it's true, but it's hard to shake, that being an artist and making a living as an artist can be really difficult. I do think that hopefully that shifts, like the value of that in our society. We all appreciate it and understand the value, but it does seem that, there's not a huge support system for that in this country, and maybe in our own individual, smaller communities and things like that. I think that's sort of a limiting belief that maybe I hold and have taken on. I've always had this, I can't walk away from my artwork. There's just, this drive for me to do that. And I do consider myself an artist and I continue to make art. But I feel like I've always had this, I've got to do something else at the same time, And so whether that was previously I taught, at the university and the community college, and now I work for the city of Reno, as public art program coordinator and do more like arts administration. Essentially, I still get to work with artists and art, and I love that. I also, to a certain degree, this is a total side note, but find that balances out some of my studio art practice. But I think, I do think you can make a living being an artist. You see examples of it all the time. And I think, it works for some people and maybe that it's just not the path for some artists, that art is your full-time gig.
I'll piggyback on that and agree with you. I believe there is that stereotype where there is minimal support as an artist. And for me, it was difficult to try and find that. I just kept getting blocked from my ventures into artistic careers. And while I was at IUPUI getting my master's, you said earlier, Megan, that you felt like everyone was always in the studio. And I'll agree with that because I was always in my studio. And one of my instructors came up to me. I was spending 12, 14 hours there. And he said, "You need to be here more." And oh my God. I was flabbergasted because I was like, I am spending so much time here developing my own practice. And I feel like I'm pushing myself to the limits. And I think that's when I realized that I cannot just be an artist. I've always been an artist in my mind since I was a child, but I have to do something else. I can't just sit in the studio and be by myself. I love being an introvert, but I have to be with people. I have to talk to people. And so I think my career in nursing and my career in art kind of play off one another, where I can be an introvert and an extrovert at the same time.
That's really helpful. Jonathan, I sort of recognize a little bit of that in my own self. I remember very early on, I'm too anxious about money. I always wanted to have a regular paycheck because the anxiety of wondering where my next paycheck was going to come from kills my creativity. I just couldn't do it. But some people can. But Megan, you mentioned, make a living. And I wonder if we could kind of dig in a little bit on that as a group. What does making a living mean? So, I think a lot of people imagine a future for themselves of artists, of seeing themselves hanging in the galleries at MoMA New York or whatever, and making millions of dollars. Of course, as I used to say to my grad students, you don't have to have talent to do that. I'm gonna get hate letters for this, but I used to use Britney Spears as a great example of not needing talent to make a lot of money. Or we could take Jeff Koons, but I digress. I wonder, what does making a living look like? And tied to that, I think a question is, what does retirement look like for an artist? So I'm really nitty gritty here, but how do you guys relate to that question?
When I was at UNR, I had that wishful thinking of becoming a famous artist. And I believe, Paul, you said something about the falsities of how Instagram works. I believe that's how the famous artist world works, where they're portraying this glamorous life that these artists lead, and you don't see the backstory. And for me, it's that backstory perhaps is a little dark. Like Basquiat, for an example. I mean, prolific artist, but he had a dark path that he led with drugs and his social circles, to where he died prematurely. So I think for me, it's not about being this huge artist right away, but building a practice over time, making a lot of work, building a huge body of work. And that can, for me, it was kind of a punch in the gut, but it takes decades to create that body of work to be recognized as an artist. And to tag along to that, I don't think an artist ever retires. In my mind, I think I'm going to be probably drawing till, I'm taking my last breath, hopefully.
I hope so too.
Yeah. I relate to what you said, Paul, about the anxiety of just, wanting that security. And so I think that's what has sort of led me on my path. I think maybe listening to this conversation, it's time to just redefine what a successful artist looks like. And everybody's definition of success is going to be different. Maybe I think when I was younger, I probably too had some of those sort of ideas that, I'm going to show all over the world in museums, and this is going to be, but I'm also not that kind of person. I'm fairly introverted myself. So I relate to what you were saying, Jonathan, about that. And not sure that I would want that kind of, spotlight and lifestyle necessarily. And if it would even be conducive to my work and making my work after a certain point. But I also wanted the security, I think, of having a regular paycheck and maybe even a retirement account, so that then maybe I could focus more on my artwork when I'm retired from my regular, day job.
Michelle, is that where you're at? Tell us.
Do you really want to know?
Yeah, we really want to know.
Yeah. I had to start my own retirement fund because I don't have a job that offers any kind of benefits or any kind of retirement. And although it's an amazing opportunity, it pays the bills. And I have just in the past year been able to start saving money from my position. So it is not glamorous, but it's also not terrible. So yeah, that's a huge question for me moving forward, is to find a job that allows for that balance that I think we all seek in balancing the professional life with the creative life. And sometimes that's easier and sometimes it's really difficult. And I guess I have a question for Megan. If working in a creative field makes it difficult for you to maintain a creative practice on your own?
I think that's a great question. I honestly, so yes and no. All of my answers are like yes and no. So when I was teaching, I felt like that really drained my creative energy, though it also, on some level, did refresh it and give me, that balance between a studio practice and that. But that is very much like you're giving a lot of your creative self, and you're doing, and interacting, and the energy involved in that seems like it's very similar in some ways to the creative energy, or it just zaps that creative energy. The job that I currently have, I feel like, is less like that. While it is still in the arts and it is a creative job, I do more facilitating for artists. I don't have to be, standing in front of a class, presenting and inspiring people the whole time, or, threatening them, no. Get their work done, no. And doing the more research for my class than I can, for my own creative practice. And so it's easier for me to separate, I think, what I'm doing now from my own artistic practice. And I think that's helpful. But it's hard. I think it's hard to sustain. Anyway, I always want more time to focus on my artwork. If I could work, a 4-day work week, 30 hours a week, or even half time, and still, I would love to do that. But that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you all are sharing this, because I think the sort of illusion of glamour is something that I think really creates a lot of long-term negative consequences. And I even think of, even people on Wall Street who are just making millions and millions of dollars. You hear all the time about these young interns that literally die in the office because they've overworked themselves. So, I think this illusion that like fame and fortune just comes is a really negative consequence of some of the kind of social media disrealities that we're living in. And I'm wondering how you all, well, and I should say, I think one of the things about grad school, so many people go to grad school thinking that teaching is going to be their ticket. I'm in my 25th year of teaching, and I can tell you my experience of academia has been that academia has some real dark undercurrents, some really tough stuff. And so I wonder, what your experience has been with other friends who are creatives, and what paths they've
sort of chosen, I talk to people all the time. I talk to parents all the time, especially at the school I'm now, which is, 24% of our students are food insecure. We have a really high homelessness rate. And I have a lot of parents who are like, what is my kid going to do with this? And so I wonder, in your cohort and your circle, what do your friends do? How have they made it work for themselves?
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that are teaching, and I did teach for a second, but got out of that because the pay was just awful, especially if you're an adjunct. But if you can secure a position that is higher tiered, then it can work for you for sure. But I'm super grateful to have an artist community here, and that's one of the best parts about living here. And it's just great to see other ways that people can make a living and still be in a creative field and be creative themselves. So I have friends that teach, I have friends that are curators, I have friends that are curatorial assistants, art handlers, and people that do, moving and packing of artwork. And I guess the film industry is pretty big here. So I have friends that are in that industry as well, but that doesn't seem that glamorous either. And then I do have friends that make money off of their work, which is kind of amazing. And I don't know how they do that, but yes, there are some.
Yeah, I feel like honestly, most of the people that I know that are creatives aren't necessarily what you would call a full-time artist and making all of their income from that. I know people that do make income from that. I know a lot of folks that I went to grad school have started their own businesses, creative businesses like photography businesses, not quite advertising, but design and things like that. I know a lot of people who work for nonprofits and have started nonprofits that are arts related. And then I also know, artists who work in jobs completely unrelated, like Jonathan. So I think it's just everybody's finding their own path.
I'll say the same thing. It's when I was in undergrad, it was my cohort. It felt like we were all going to go to grad school and we were all going to go into the gallery space in New York and LA. And we all had that premonition. And it's just funny seeing where everyone has led their lives, construction. I definitely have a handful of friends in teaching, but just a wide array of jobs that a lot of them are in the arts. And that's their side gig.
How do you three figure out, there's so much mystery to what we do. How do you get a gallery? How do you get a museum show? How do you pay your bills? Should I set up an LLC? How do I pay a studio assistant? How do you guys figure out the answers to those questions?
I'm still figuring them out.
Yeah, I think some of it comes from being around other artists. So like Michelle said, she's got a group that she feels, she's connected to in Atlanta. And I think I learn a lot from other people who have done those things before, who have started an LLC or, filed for a business license and started that kind of thing, or who, have gotten gallery representation before. I feel like a lot of what I've done, I've applied for shows. I send my work out to varying degrees of success, lots and lots of rejection letters for things. And you always hear that. But sometimes you get something, and then the more you are working and putting your stuff out there, I feel like a lot of it is connections that friends can make for you, or that, you make through showing your work in one place, and then it sort of happens organically. That's what I have found. I haven't really been the kind of artist that tries to, I haven't really tried to get a lot of gallery representation or like promote myself in that way. So I'm not the person to talk to necessarily for advice on that. But all of those things have sort of happened organically for me. So that's not very helpful.
I'll agree with you, Megan. I'm right there with you. It's just, it's hard to go down those avenues, and growing your art career organically has seemed to work for me the most. And then rejection letters after rejection letters, they used to hurt. They hurt less and less. And at a point, they start making you relentless, trying to just push on through and keep going, keep making work and keep trying.
Yeah, my evolution has been very organic as well. So, going to shows, mustering up the courage to, you don't have to go directly to the gallery director or anything like that. But if you show up enough and you make friends, have them vouch for you, and just keep practicing and putting your work out there as much as you can. Either, I'm not great at this either, at like the self-promotion thing, and I'm not good at schmoozing. So those are challenging for me. So I just have to kind of lean back on the work and let that do the heavy lifting, which is not always that reliable, but
Yeah, that whole bit, it's funny. I have artists who are a year out of grad school and artists who are 50 years out of school asking me, how do I get shows? I get that question all the time. And I think I've sort of stopped answering it because there's no one answer. Recently somebody asked me and I said, well, when people send me an email with attachments, I delete it immediately because I don't want a virus. I don't want my email sending some awful spam to all 5,000 other people that work in my university. And I think, and it's so different, I think, from Megan and John up in Northern Nevada, mentioning your career, I have to say, when I was an artist living there, I felt so supportive, and the creative community in Reno is really amazing. But if you're trying to find a gallery in New York or LA, living in Reno is not necessarily the greatest thing for you. Whereas Michelle, you're in Atlanta where there are so many galleries and there's artists, sort of doing their thing. And so I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we can all agree there's really just so many different ways to do this. And so I wonder if you three could talk a little more about how do you decide if what you're doing is working for you?
That's a great question. I feel like all of these, I'm just like, I don't know that I have these very concrete thought processes that happen where it's like, oh, this isn't working because X, Y, and Z. It's more just like, yeah, I don't like this, and then I have lots of work in my studio that I've basically thrown away, that I'm like, no, this is not, it's just not good. It's not the path I want to go down.
So do you think, Megan, that you've developed a kind of rubric based on experience? Like, if something didn't work for you because you've done enough to know?
Maybe it's that. And maybe it's, my aesthetic too that I've developed. And if something doesn't quite match that, or I don't know, if that makes sense. But yeah, maybe it is just doing things for so long or over and over.
Yeah. Have you figured out a way to say no when your friend asks you to photograph their wedding for free?
I did.
Yes and
yeah,
no.
I do not like to do that. And normally I just say, I can recommend somebody for you for that, but you'd have to pay them.
Yeah. Michelle, John, what do you guys think?
I don't know if I have an answer for that. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like right now things are a little more balanced than they ever have been for me, and I just hope that they continue to be that way. I think I get, I think I always want more time in the studio. I think I want balance more than I want time, though, because I feel like I have time, but it is spent doing other things than the studio practice. So, yeah, I think working toward a balance where the work feels more prioritized, or that I can give more attention to it, not just, in the evenings after dinner, or on the Sundays and Mondays that I try to dedicate to the practice. So yeah, I think working towards something that would allow for a schedule like that is what my goal is, my current goal.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that. Balance is a big thing. I could, if I had the opportunity, I would just be in my studio is my living room floor with a masonite board where I draw. And I feel like a child when I'm in. I think that's where my art practice is kind of at, where it is kind of childlike, and I get to draw on the floor like my 4-year-old self. But balance is definitely key, because I could be there for hours and hours, but I have, unfortunately, adult stuff to do, and I like doing other things. So finding that balance and knowing when to stop drawing and start doing something else is huge. So I like what Michelle said about that.
Yeah, I like that. Thanks. Thank you, guys. Crystal, Sharon, any questions that you want to share before? I do have a final question if we still have time, but if you have questions, and I know we want to thank the people who have made this talk possible as well.
Oh, go ahead with your final question.
Okay.
The conversation's been outstanding. Thank you. Keep going.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah, thank you all for making this possible. I think many of us could agree. The bonds of friendship and affection, I've never valued them more than just the last 2 years. So it's so nice to see the three of you, and we have connections in different ways. It's really great. So I think, my final question is, for a young artist just kind of on the path, maybe a high schooler who's got to make some big decisions on where they're going to go to school, are they going to do this, can do that? What would you have wanted to hear as a person in that position, and would it have made a difference?
Great question.
Yeah, retirement. Like finding a job that allows, it's just hard because we run on money, and it's like that. I don't want that to be the way that my life is shaped, but it is in America. And so I think that having those difficult conversations, and it sounds cliche, but how are you going to make money? I wasn't really asked that a lot, and that might be a good thing and that might be a bad thing, but I'm so grateful to have had Paul as a mentor in undergrad, because we actually did have professional practices classes. We downloaded that Mint app, which I still have, so I think just really kind of looking at the realistic picture of it. And then I think, like Megan said, we live in a society where there isn't a huge support system for the arts, but there are certain cities that have amazing arts funding. There are certain countries that have amazing arts funding. And then I think, the idea of being a famous artist in New York or LA or Chicago maybe shouldn't be the goal. It should be, finding a job that is related or not. In Jonathan's case, I think that's really interesting. And I wonder if you have a little bit more creative reserve because of that. But yeah, I think having those tough conversations about money is realistic and necessary, but hopefully shouldn't stand in the way from pursuing this path.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Megan.
No.
All right, me first. For me, I lucked out. I didn't know I was going to go into nursing in my 20s. I was full-fledged, gung-ho about arts. Again, trying to earn my master's, and my life got flipped upside down, and I landed into nursing by accident. And for the last 8 years, it's been an amazing job. And I didn't know that. No one told me how to lead this artistic life. I had plenty of mentors, but we never talked about professional development. So I would say that was one thing that was lacking in my art life. And I had to kind of figure that stuff out on my own, and I'm still figuring it out on my own. Books, YouTube, that helps a lot. And for the students that are kind of undecided where to go in their lives, don't be afraid to take on a second career. Again, this nursing career, I've lucked out because I only work 3 days a week. They're long hours, they're 12, 13-hour shifts, but I have 4 days off to pretty much dedicate to my art practice, which is a lot of time. So it's nice.
Yeah. I agree that there needs to be more practical information given and practical, acknowledgement of sort of the practical aspects of being an artist, but I don't know that that's what I would have wanted to hear. And I was very lucky. I feel like, I don't know if my parents worried about me as I embarked on, being a photography major in college and then going into debt to go to grad school for art. But they encouraged me the whole time. So I feel lucky in that they never said, what are you going to do? Like really do with your life. And so I think probably someone coming out of high school does not need to hear like, you can't make money being an artist and it's difficult, because I would hate to discourage people from pursuing their creative side. I think maybe something like, you don't ignore all of that stereotype of the famous artist and all of that, get rid of that, but find a way to continue to create. And, whether that is making income through your art or not, that there's a path that you can find. And you don't have to go to the most prestigious school. You don't have to, just keep making your work.
I love that. Think all three of you. Thanks to all three of you. I think, it's, I often reflect on what a privilege it was for myself to take it's something I call generational investment. I was in a position to invest in myself as an artist because of all the people in my family and colleagues and teachers who came before me and just made it possible. And my hope, and this is my segue to Sharon, is that this current generation, I think some of us in this group are old enough to remember when the NEA actually gave grants to artists. And my hope is that this generation, and I see it happening in so many other ways, really takes the reins and recognizes that the future is really ours to make, and that we have to push, Michelle will start talking about this, there are other places that support the arts better. And so I hope that everybody listening and one generation sees that it's through advocacy and pushing our elected leaders to support the arts that it can be even more realistic. And I know that it's been through a lot of grant sponsorship and support that these talks have been possible. So anyway, thank you three. It's really great to see your faces. Great to see Crystal and Sharon. And Sharon, I know you have some parting words for us. So thanks for letting me moderate this and bring everybody together.
Well, thank you. This was a wonderful conversation and very inspiring. Thank you very, very much. So speaking of funding, our Nevada Neighbors series, I believe you guys are number 75 in our series that we started in 2003. So if we can toot our own horn about that a little bit, It's sort of cool, I think.
Yeah. Isn't that the Diamond Jubilee?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm waiting for my diamond earrings, Sharon, as a
Darling, they're on the way. They're on the way.
Right.
I didn't think of that. That's pretty cool. Okay. Nevada Neighbors has been funded consistently by Nevada Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities. And CCAI is funded by the John and Grace Nauman Foundation, based here in Carson City, the Nevada Arts Council, and the National Endowment for the Arts, the Kaplan Family Charitable Fund, U.S. Bank Foundation, Southwest Gas Corporation, and our wonderful accountant, Steele and Associates here in Carson City, that makes sure the IRS doesn't come after us. And CCAI's generous members and funders, members and sponsors. And the Governor's Office of Economic Development provided additional support through the Nevada Pandemic Emergency Technical Support Grant for 2021. That was a lifesaver. So this has been a wonderful conversation. And Crystal's going to make a little flyer, a digital flyer, and we're going to print a few, and we'll send you each a couple prints because we're still 20th century and believe in print. And I believe I have everybody's addresses. So Crystal will put this up on our YouTube channel. And thank you. It was great to see you all. Thank you. We may have to do it again.
That was fun. Thank you.